My wife lied, cheated, and smiled at dinner, so I packed up and left the family behind. I was 38 when I discovered my life was built on lies. Beth and I had been married for 15 years, with 2 kids, Michael 12 and Sophie 9. We had the picture-perfect suburban existence, nice house in a good school district, 2 reliable cars, and summer vacations at her parents' lake house. I worked as an engineering manager at a tech company while Beth ran a successful interior design business from home. We were comfortable, stable, the envy of our friends. At least that's what I thought. The first crack appeared when I found receipts for hotels in the city, miles from any of Beth's client sites. Just small discrepancies at first, easy to dismiss. Maybe she met clients there for convenience. Maybe there was a design showcase I didn't know about. I didn't question her about it, didn't want to seem like I was checking up on her. We'd always trusted each other, or so I believed. Then came the late-night call she'd take in the bathroom, shower running to mask her voice. The unexplained absences during family events. The new lingerie I never saw her wear. Classic signs I was too blind to recognize or too trusting to acknowledge. Our sex life had dwindled over the years, something I chalked up to busy careers and raising kids. Now I wondered if there was more to it, if her emotional distance had deeper roots. Beth had always been somewhat reserved, even cold at times, but lately she seemed completely detached, like she was just going through the motions of our marriage. I might have continued in blissful ignorance if not for Dan, my best friend since college who worked at the same tech company. He called me into his office one Tuesday afternoon, his face grave. "Dave, we need to talk," he said, closing the door. "It's about Beth." My stomach dropped. "What about her?" He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "I saw her yesterday at the Madison Hotel downtown. She was with someone. A man. Maybe it was a client," I said automatically. Dan shook his head. "Dave, they were holding hands. Kissing. I wouldn't tell you if I wasn't certain." I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. The Madison was one of the hotels on those receipts. Parts of the puzzle were connecting in the worst possible way. The next day I checked her phone while she was in the shower. It was password protected, but I knew the code, her mother's birthday. There in her messages was the confirmation of my worst fears. Dozens of texts to someone saved simply as J, filled with intimate details, plans to meet, declarations of desire. The most recent from just last night, after I'd gone to bed. "Miss you already. Lunch tomorrow." I put the phone down, feeling sick. I wanted to confront her immediately, demand the truth, but something held me back. I needed more information, needed to understand the full scope of the betrayal before I faced her. So I began my investigation. Over the next 2 weeks, I pieced together the truth through credit card statements, suspicious calendar entries, and careful observations. Beth was having an affair with James Thorpe, a wealthy property developer whose downtown loft she'd been decorating for the past 8 months. The project that she complained was taking forever, the difficult client who was never satisfied. They were covers for regular rendezvous that had been going on right under my nose. I discovered the affair had started about 10 months ago, around the time Beth had become increasingly critical of me, finding fault with everything from my appearance to my parenting style. I tried harder to please her, to fix whatever was broken between us, never suspecting she was deliberately creating distance to justify her betrayal. Perhaps the most painful discovery was that several of our friends knew or suspected, but it kept silent. At Jason and Kara's barbecue, I overheard Kara asking Beth if she was still seeing that client, with a knowing smile. Beth had laughed, said she didn't know what Kara was talking about, but the exchange was telling. Our social circle was aware of cracks in our marriage I couldn't see. Through it all, I maintained a facade of normalcy for the kids, helping with homework, attending Michael's basketball games, driving Sophie to dance lessons. Beth and I moved around each other like actors in a play, reciting lines about grocery lists and school projects without any real connection. If the kids noticed the tension, they didn't mention it. Then came the dinner that changed everything. It was our anniversary, 15 years of marriage. Despite everything I'd learned, I decided to go through with our reservation at La Pierre, the French restaurant where we'd celebrated every anniversary since moving to this town. Part of me hoped there was an explanation, that I was misreading the evidence, that Beth would confess, apologize, and we could somehow repair what was broken. We dressed up, left the kids with a sitter, and drove to the restaurant in separate cars since Beth had a client meeting that afternoon. She was radiant in a black dress I'd never seen before, her hair freshly done, makeup perfect. She smiled as we were seated, ordered champagne, offered a toast. "To 15 wonderful years," she said, raising her glass. "And many more to come." I looked into her eyes as we clinked glasses, searching for guilt, remorse, anything that suggested she recognized the magnitude of her betrayal. Instead, I saw only a practiced warmth, A performance for the benefit of the other diners, the waiter, perhaps even herself. Then her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced down, and a different smile flickered across her face, a genuine one, intimate and secret. I knew without looking it was him, texting on our anniversary while she sat across from me celebrating our marriage. The audacity of it, the sheer disrespect, turned my blood cold. Is that important? I asked, nodding toward her phone. Just work, she said, slipping it into her purse. You know how clients are, always something urgent. Another lie, so smooth, so effortless. I wondered how many hundreds of lies had preceded it, how many times I'd accepted her explanations without question. We made it through dinner somehow, discussing the kids, summer plans, anything but what was really happening. Beth seemed almost giddy, sharing gossip about neighbors, ordering another bottle of wine. Was she overcompensating, trying to distract me? Or was she simply relieved to be maintaining the status quo, her double life intact? As we waited for dessert, she excused herself to the restroom, leaving her purse behind. Her phone buzzed again. I shouldn't have looked, but in that moment my need for certainty overwhelmed my scruples. I slipped the phone from her purse and saw the message preview from Jay. Dinner with the husband? Hurry back to me after. Left the door unlocked. Something in me broke. The last shred of doubt, the last hope that there was some explanation besides the obvious. Beth was planning to go to him after our anniversary dinner. The man she was cheating with was waiting for her, expecting her, in what I could only assume was the downtown loft I was indirectly paying for through her business accounts. When Beth returned, smiling that empty smile, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't live this lie anymore, couldn't pretend everything was normal when my life had become a cruel farce. I paid the bill, declined dessert, and drove home in silence, Beth following in her car, no doubt texting him that she'd be delayed but still coming. At home I thanked the sitter, waited until Beth was upstairs changing, then went to the garage where an emergency bag was already packed. I'd prepared it days ago, somehow knowing this moment would come. I scribbled a note, I know about James. Don't try to contact me, and placed it on the kitchen counter alongside my wedding ring. Then I drove away from the house I'd helped build, the family I loved, the life I thought was real. Tears blinded me as I pulled onto the highway, but a strange sense of calm was settling over me. The worst had happened, the thing I'd feared most. And somehow I was still breathing, still moving forward. The end of my marriage felt like both an amputation and a liberation. The first week after leaving was a blur. I checked into a hotel outside the city, not telling anyone where I was. Beth called constantly, left desperate voicemails that evolved from confused to angry to pleading. I listened to a few, then stopped. Each message was filled with more lies, excuses, explanations that contradicted the evidence I'd gathered. She never once offered a simple, I'm sorry, only justifications for why I'd driven her to this, for how I'd failed her. Michael and Sophie called too, their voices small and confused. Those calls I answered, though it gutted me to hear them ask when I was coming home. I told them I loved them, that mom and dad were having some grown-up problems, that none of this was their fault. Hollow reassurances that did nothing to erase the pain in their voices. Every call ended with Sophie crying and Michael trying to sound brave, saying it's okay, Dad, we understand, when clearly they didn't. How could they, when I barely understood it myself? I called in sick to work for a week, functioning on autopilot. I needed legal advice but couldn't face talking to anyone, knowing I'd have to explain the humiliating details of my wife's betrayal. Finally, I mustered the courage to contact Steve, a lawyer I knew from Michael's basketball league. He was professional, compassionate, listened without judgment as I outlined the situation. You need to go home, Dave, he said when I'd finished. Leaving the family home can be viewed as abandonment in divorce proceedings. It could affect custody arrangements, property division, everything. But I can't live there with her, I protested. Not after what she's done. He leaned forward, his expression serious. Then she should leave. But one of you needs to stay with the kids, maintain the status quo. Courts prefer stability for the children. That night I texted Beth, telling her I'd be home the following day, that we needed to talk about arrangements, that I expected her to tell me the full truth. No response came, but when I pulled into the driveway the next afternoon, her car was gone. The kids rushed to me when I walked in, both talking at once. Mom said she had to go away for work, Sophie reported. She said to tell you she's sorry. Michael watched me more carefully, his eyes too knowing for a 12-year-old. Is Mom with her boyfriend? He asked quietly when Sophie went to get her drawings to show me. The question knocked the wind from me. How did you know? I managed to ask. He shrugged, looking suddenly much older than his years. I heard her on the phone sometimes. And she was always smiling at her phone, like Sophie does when she's watching those dance videos. It didn't seem like work. Kids notice everything, even when we think we're protecting them. I sat Michael down, told him as honestly as I could that yes, Mom and I were having problems, that sometimes adults make mistakes that hurt other people. I assured him none of this was his fault, that both his mom and I loved him and Sophie more than anything, that we'd always be their parents no matter what happened between us. The days that followed were surreal. I took leave from work to get the kids through the end of the school year, maintain some semblance of normalcy while their mother was apparently shacking up with her lover. Beth texted the kids daily but made no attempt to see them or explain her absence. It was as if she'd chosen her new life completely, leaving behind the family she'd helped create. When she finally contacted me, it was through her lawyer. She wanted a divorce, no attempts at reconciliation, no marriage counseling, just a clean break and a custody arrangement that would give her the kids on weekends and some weeknights. Her lawyer explained she was finding herself after years of emotional neglect in our marriage. The gaslighting was breathtaking. Somehow in her narrative, I had driven her to cheat, not the other way around. Word of our separation spread quickly through our social circle. Some friends disappeared immediately, unwilling to navigate the awkwardness of taking sides. Others rallied around me, bringing casseroles, offering to watch the kids, checking in with texts and calls. Dan was a constant support, coming over to watch basketball games or just sit in silence when talking was too much. The most surprising support came from Beth's sister Claire, who showed up at my door one evening, eyes red from crying. "I'm so sorry," she said, hugging me tight. "What Beth is doing, it's unforgivable." Over coffee, she revealed that Beth had been unfaithful in her previous relationship before me, something I'd never known. This wasn't a midlife crisis or a momentary lapse in judgment, but a pattern of behavior. Claire had confronted Beth about James, urged her to come clean to me or end the affair. Beth had responded by cutting her sister off, refusing to speak to her for the past 3 months. "Something doesn't add up, Dave," Claire said, twisting her coffee cup. "This isn't just about the affair. Beth's been acting strange for over a year, changing her appearance, her friends, even the way she talks. It's like she's having some kind of breakdown or identity crisis." Her words sparked something in my memory. Beth had changed her appearance drastically about a year ago, cutting her shoulder-length brown hair into a platinum blonde pixie, started wearing clothes that seemed designed for someone decades younger. I'd complimented the changes, trying to be supportive, though privately I missed the woman I'd married. Now I wondered if these external changes reflected something deeper, a fundamental shift in who she wanted to be or how she saw herself. But whatever Beth's internal struggles, they didn't excuse her actions. She'd made choices, destructive, selfish choices that hurt the people who loved her most. As the weeks passed, my initial shock and pain calcified into something harder, colder. I stopped checking her social media, stopped asking the kids about her calls or texts, focused instead on creating a stable, loving environment in her absence. Then 2 months after I'd walked out of La Pierre, Beth called at midnight, sounding drunk and distraught. "He left me, Dave," she sobbed. "James is gone. He was married too. Did you know that? His wife found out and he chose her. He was never going to leave her." I felt nothing, no satisfaction at her pain, no desire to comfort her. Just a profound weariness. "What do you want, Beth?" I asked. "I want to come home," she whispered. "I made a terrible mistake. We can fix this. I know we can. For the kids." There it was. Not, "I love you," not, "I miss you," but for the kids. She wanted to return not because she valued our marriage, but because her other option had evaporated. I was her backup plan, her safety net, nothing more. "No," I said quietly. "You can't come home. This isn't a timeout or a temporary separation. You chose to lie and cheat for almost a year. You chose to leave your children. Those choices have consequences. You can't keep me from my own house," she said, her tone shifting from pleading to angry. "My name is on the mortgage too. And they're my kids." "You're right," I said. "They're your kids. Kids who've been asking why their mother disappeared, why she only calls on FaceTime instead of coming to basketball games and dance recitals. Kids who deserve better than what you've given them lately." She started crying again, but the manipulation was transparent. Beth had always used tears strategically to end arguments, redirect blame, avoid consequences. I'd fallen for it countless times over the years, rushing to comfort her, apologize even when I'd done nothing wrong. "Not this time. You should have thought about the kids before you started sleeping with James," I said. "Before you walked out on them to play house with your boyfriend. The kids and I are doing fine without you." I hung up, knowing that was only partly true. Michael and Sophie missed their mother desperately for all her flaws. And I was barely holding it together, working full-time, being both parents, handling a house and lawsuit and the emotional fallout of betrayal. But we were surviving, finding new routines, new ways to be a family even with this enormous hole in our lives. The next day Steve called, warning me that Beth was filing for emergency custody, claiming I was keeping the children from her. It was another lie, of course. I'd never prevented her from seeing them. She'd chosen not to visit. But fighting the petition would be expensive, stressful. Beth knew exactly how to hurt me, how to use the children as weapons in her campaign to either punish me or force a reconciliation. For the first time since discovering the affair, I allowed myself to feel the full force of my anger. Not just at the infidelity, but at the casual cruelty, the manipulation, the years of small deceits that I now saw clearly. Beth hadn't just cheated. She constructed an alternate reality and forced me to live in it, making me doubt my own perceptions. And now she was willing to traumatize our children further to get her way. Enough was enough. I'd been playing defense, reacting to Beth's provocations, trying to shield the kids from the ugliness. It was time to start making proactive choices about the life I wanted for myself and my children. Time to stop letting Beth control the narrative. 6 months after that fateful anniversary dinner, our divorce was finalized. The terms were better than I expected: primary custody of the kids with Beth having visitation every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. The house would be sold once Michael graduated high school, with proceeds split equally. Beth's business remained hers. My retirement accounts remained mine, fair given the circumstances. Beth had fought the custody arrangement initially, but her behavior undermined her case. She missed scheduled visits, showed up unprepared, or still hungover from whatever lifestyle she was now living. The custody evaluator noted her inconsistent parenting and apparent prioritization of social activities, recommending limited visitation until she demonstrated greater stability. I'd expected to feel vindicated when the judge ruled in my favor. Instead, I felt only sadness for my children, who deserved two fully engaged parents, not one trying to compensate for the other's deficiencies. After court, Beth approached, looking nothing like the polished woman I'd been married to. Her blonde hair had grown out, showing dark roots. Her clothes were rumpled, her makeup applied with less care than before. "Is this what you wanted?" she asked bitterly. "To punish me?" I shook my head. "I never wanted any of this, Beth. I wanted our marriage, our family. You're the one who threw it away." For a moment her mask slipped, revealing something raw and pain beneath the anger. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold resentment that had become her default expression. Home became a sanctuary in the months that followed. I repainted the living room, replaced Beth's fussy decorative pillows with comfortable ones the kids could actually use. Sophie helped me choose cheerful art for the walls, while Michael took charge of reorganizing the garage. Small changes that made the house feel like ours, not a museum to a marriage that no longer existed. Work became a refuge too. I threw myself into new projects, earned a promotion that came with more flexibility to manage school pickups and sick days. Colleagues who'd walked on eggshells around me during the separation now treated me normally again, inviting me to happy hours, including me in office jokes. Slowly, I remembered how to laugh, how to engage with the world beyond my domestic crisis. Dan continued his campaign to get me dating again. "Come on, man," he insisted over beers one Friday. "It's been over a year since you found out about the affair. You need to get back out there." I shook my head. The kids need stability right now. Bringing someone new into the mix would just complicate things. He raised an eyebrow. "The kids or you? Because it seems like you're using them as an excuse." He wasn't entirely wrong. The thought of dating terrified me. How could I trust anyone after Beth? How could I risk that kind of devastation again? But life has a way of ignoring your carefully constructed excuses. I met Rachel at Michael's basketball tournament, a fellow parent cheering from the bleachers. Her son Tyler played point guard to Michael's forward position. We'd nodded to each other at games before but never spoken until that day, when both boys scored in a critical play and we turned to each other with identical expressions of parental pride. "Did you see that?" we said simultaneously, then laughed at the coincidence. She was pretty in an understated way, with curly brown hair pulled into a messy ponytail and glasses that kept sliding down her nose. No makeup, no fancy clothes, just a mom in jeans and a team sweatshirt radiating enthusiasm for her kid. After the game, the boys wanted to celebrate their win with pizza. Tyler invited Michael, Rachel invited me and Sophie, and suddenly we were having something that felt suspiciously like a family dinner. Conversation flowed easily, the kids got along, Rachel laughed at my terrible jokes. It felt normal, comfortable in a way nothing had for over a year. I did text her. Coffee became a regular thing, then lunch, occasionally dinner when we could both find sitters. Rachel was divorced too, with a similar story though less dramatic than mine. She understood the unique challenges of single parenting, the constant juggling act, the stretches of loneliness, the fierce protectiveness toward kids who'd already experienced one major upheaval. 2 years after the divorce, Beth returned, transformed by rehab, therapy, and the harsh consequences of her choices. She'd been sober 18 months, had a stable job teaching design at a community college, lived in a modest apartment with a spare room decorated for the kids. She'd done the work, painful, grueling work, to understand why she'd self-destructed, to build healthier patterns, to become someone her children could trust again. The court had gradually reinstated her visitation rights as she demonstrated consistency, reliability, appropriate boundaries. The kids were cautious at first, especially Michael, who'd seen the worst of her behavior during the separation. But over time they relaxed, began to enjoy their time with her, even look forward to it. I kept my distance, maintaining cordial but minimal contact, focused only on co-parenting logistics. Rachel and I were building a life together. The kids were thriving. Beth was a part of their lives, not mine. Then Sophie was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. At 11, she was scared, confused by the sudden upheaval in her body, the constant monitoring, the insulin injections, the dietary restrictions. Michael was protective, worried about his sister. I was overwhelmed, trying to manage her care while working, keeping the household running, supporting both kids emotionally. Beth stepped up in ways I never expected. She took family leave from her teaching position, researched diabetes management, accompanied Sophie to medical appointments. She coordinated with the school, learned how to count carbs, calculate insulin doses, recognize the signs of high and low blood sugar. When Sophie had her first severe low in the middle of the night, it was Beth who stayed calm, administered the glucagon, showed me how to document the episode for her doctor. One evening, as we sat in Sophie's hospital room during a brief admission, Beth looked at me with tired eyes. "I'm sorry, Dave," she said simply. "For everything. Not just the affair, but the years before. The lying, the manipulation, the selfishness. You deserved better. The kids deserved better." "What happened, Beth?" I asked. "Not just the affair, but everything. It was like you became a different person." She was quiet for a long time, watching Sophie sleep before answering. "I hated myself," she finally said. "Had for years. Hated being a wife, a mother, the constraints, the expectations. It was something broken in me, this belief that I was missing out, that life was passing me by. The affair, the drinking, they were attempts to feel something, anything besides the emptiness." Her therapist had diagnosed bipolar II disorder, explained how the impulsivity, hypersexuality, risk-taking were symptoms, not character flaws. She'd been self-medicating with alcohol, making the mood swings worse, creating a destructive cycle that ultimately exploded our marriage. That night, as Rachel and I lay in bed discussing Sophie's care, I shared Beth's apology, her explanation. "Do you believe her?" Rachel asked. I thought about it. "Yes, I do. Not that it changes anything between us, but I think she's genuinely remorseful. And I think she's finally getting the help she needs." Rachel nodded thoughtfully. "That's good, Dave. For the kids, for all of you really. Healing is better than bitterness." 6 months later, Rachel and I married in a small ceremony. Michael stood as my best man, Sophie as Rachel's maid of honor, Tyler beaming from the front row. Beth attended at the kids' request, sat quietly during the ceremony, hugged me briefly at the reception. "I hope you'll be very happy, Dave," she said, and I knew she meant it. "I'm glad the kids have Rachel in their lives. They need someone steady, someone who puts them first." That night at our wedding reception, watching Rachel dance with Michael while Sophie taught Tyler some complicated TikTok routine, I felt an unexpected sense of completion. My life had taken a detour through pain, betrayal, loss, yet somehow arrived at a destination more authentic, more aligned with my true self than the marriage I'd thought was perfect. Beth would always be part of our story, the mother of my children, a cautionary tale, a complicated human being worthy of compassion if not trust. Rachel would be my partner, my love, the steady presence our family needed. The kids would carry scars from their mother's choices, but also strength, resilience, emotional intelligence beyond their years. My wife had lied, cheated, smiled at dinner while planning to meet her lover. I had packed up, left the family I thought we had. But in that leaving, that painful, wrenching departure, I had found something unexpected, truth. Not just about Beth's betrayal, but about resilience, about human capacity for both destruction and renewal. About my own strength, my own needs, my own worth. I hadn't left my family behind at all. I'd taken the best parts with me, carried them through the darkest time, preserved what mattered most. And together we were building something new, something honest, something real.